Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. It is Aisha Mohammed from Aisha Reads, and today I will be talking to you about the books that I plan on reading this month. So my to be read, my TBR, and honestly, I suck at introductions. So let's just get started. So I'm going to pretend as if I did not disappear for 2 months. I just magically came back because new year, new me. This month I actually want to read at least 12 books. I've read two, but then on this list I have 12 different books that I intend on reading. I'm trying to read more into the genres that I found interesting last year. So, number one, historical fiction. I read The Vanishing Half last year and that book was amazing. So that prompted me to read some other historical fiction books, mostly in the realm of like African American history and also African history. First historical fiction book that I plan on reading this month is The Nickel Boys. It's an African American story in times of segregation, and I thought that since that was a similar quality to Red at the Bone, written by Jacqueline Woodson, which is an amazing book that you should probably check out too, and also The Vanishing Half, had similar concepts that kind of are also visible in Nickel Boys. I just told myself I have to read this book as well. The second book is The Fisherman by Chigozie Obioma. This book perhaps is one of the books that I have that has so many awards, so many good things written about it, and I haven't gotten to the meat of it yet. As you can see, I'm clearly just here, so I'm not even quarter way through the book. But I told myself that it's probably very interesting. Also, he's been compared to Chinua Achebe, so honestly, if I'm not reading him, who am I reading? The third book I intend on reading is The Book of Longings. I selected this book because I thought it was very interesting. Number one, it talks about a woman in the first century, and it also has the influence of like Jesus and Judas, and I was just like, I've never actually read a book that has taken place in the first century from a woman's perspective. It's a historical fiction, kind of different from like the African American theme that I was going for this month, but something that just kind of struck it as interesting to me, because what I tend to notice is that when it comes to religion, people usually don't tend to, or at least the books I read, don't tend to cover like, oh, religious fantasies. So hopefully I got the summary of that book right, and if I did, I am interested in reading that. Then another book that I want to read under the historical fiction realm is Houseboy by Ferdinand Oyono. So I bought this book last summer, never got to it because I left it at home when I went to school, and I was like, oh, it's. I feel like I could totally get this done in like one afternoon. But the reason why I picked it is because it talks about colonialism in Cameroon and essentially just finding your identity, and also the whole topic that I think not many books I read about cover, but the whole idea of just idealizing another culture and then also finding out, oh, okay, that culture isn't exactly what I thought it to be, is one of the main reasons why I not only selected it but bought this book. So I do hope I have a fun time reading it. Now that we are done with books in terms of historical fiction, let's us go to science fiction. Now, do not judge me because my science fiction books, like the first two science fiction books, are not contemporary, they're more classical. And the reason why I selected them was because I saw a video on TikTok. I am on that app too much, but I saw a video on TikTok about a bunch of high school students, I think in like the 1990s, that were predicting how 2020 would be. And I just found it interesting that some certain like characteristics that they mentioned, not necessarily like in terms of technological development, just like certain ways that culture around the world would change, like changed. I thought it was interesting, and I thought like, oh, maybe there will be a parallel in like looking at past books and looking at past years that have already occurred and seeing if there was some sort of like similarities between that. So the first science fiction book that I selected for this list was 1984. I don't know if this is like an American school required book, but I have known this book since I would even say like since I was in year 7, JSS1. I just never had the opportunity to read. It was essentially written in the 40s, by George Orwell, and it just focuses on what I think he thought 1984 or like the 1980s would look like. And I just want to see if, obviously, if he imagined some type of like artificial intelligence boom, I doubt that would have happened. But if there was a change in the way people thought, and if that similarity was pointed out, I think that would be interesting to note. Second science fiction book I want to read is Fahrenheit 451. Essentially, this one talks about being in a society where books are being banned. Or from the summary, what I got was that certain books are being burned by certain groups of people, and everyone is just forced to either watch TV for their source of information or source of entertainment. I just find that really interesting. Maybe the author was trying to focus on how less people are reading books and how books contain or how books deliver information quite differently. If that is what he was going for, I think that would be nice to read. Also, keep in mind, I think some books I have as audiobooks because I most of the books on this list in which I do not have with me, I borrowed from my library, and I'm currently not where I'm not in the same location as my library right now, or the library close to my school, I mean. So all the books I borrowed are in ebook form. So I'll be reading them through my laptop. So the last science fiction book I selected was The Memory Police, which honestly, I think all these books I selected are just amazing segue into science fiction because I used to be a science fiction nerd, and I found it difficult to pick science fiction books, but all the ones I selected right here are the ones I think that they just grasp me because they seem very interesting. So the Memory Police essentially is, I think it's a community of people, or if not the whole world. We live in a society where things are disappearing. So when things disappear, people forget. But I think there's a certain group of people that don't forget, and then the Memory Police essentially wants to hunt down those people because I think what disappears is meant to be forgotten. So those people threaten essentially people forgetting what disappeared. So I think that's interesting. I don't think I've read science fiction in that sense before. It also kind of gives me the vibes of like Fahrenheit 451, in which they don't want books to be existing. So it's like we don't want this certain thing in our society to exist, and we want people to not think about it. So then what happens when people think about it, like they threaten the whole fabric of the society that's being imagined in these books? Okay, so literary fiction. I'm still trying to figure out the main difference between like literary fiction and regular fiction, but from what I gathered, I think literary fiction is more of a commentary on society. It's more character focused, and some of you might be like, Aisha, you did not enjoy The Catcher in the Rye, for which I say I have read other literary fiction books that I thought were amazing. So let us just pretend as if that chapter of my life never happened. Let's just go with the first literary fiction book I selected, which is Stay With Me. So I have read The Secret Lives of Abashagi's Four Wives. This book was amazing. When I was reading Stay With Me, the book I intended, like when I was reading the summary of the book, I thought that it kind of bore like a lot of similarity to this novel, which I mean, I don't mind reading it again. I don't mind reading similar tropes again. I think this trope, this drama was interesting, so I don't mind rereading it. The second literary fiction book I selected was The Color Purple, which I heard discusses the trauma and the abuse of African American women in the 50s and 60s, if I'm not mistaken. And I think the reason why I selected this book, it's very heavy, quite obviously, but the reason why I selected this book was because I think right now people are having a lot of discussions about social issues that have been here for a long time and that are just reinventing themselves in different ways. And I think that reading books like this definitely does give one, even though it's historical, even though it's like in the realm of historical fiction, it does certainly pick on like things that quite happened literally. It also does cover the aspects of historical fiction and can give more depth to issues that are being discussed today. Was there an angle change? I have no clue. I definitely think that this would give more depth to understanding issues that are being discussed, and also the people that are discussing them and understanding where they are coming from without putting the burden of them having to explain every single thing. The third book on this list of literary fiction is Freshwater. I have read books from this author before, and this author wrote The Life of Vivek Oji, which that book was amazing, and I do hope I have the opportunity to talk about it on my channel one of these days. But their books tend to focus on identity issues and also identity while being Nigerian. I think I really appreciate that because a lot of people don't talk about that a lot in books I tend to read. The summary does state that the main character called Ada has a leg on the other side. I do not know if that is her identity goes differently, or if the identity, or if the person actually has a leg on the other side. Either way, I am interested in delving into this novel because I trust the author's writing skills. So, the last category for the books I intend on reading this month is fiction. The first one, like these two books were just really random. I was just scrolling through my Libby app. If you guys don't have Libby and you borrow books from your library, I strongly suggest that you get the Libby app. But anyways, I was borrowing books from my Libby app and I just saw I'm pregnant. And I was like, oh, okay, what's this about? I think I saw the movie trailer coming out soon. Essentially, I think it just talks about abortion laws in America and a teenager who needs to get one legally, so has to drive to another state to get one. So I was just like, you know what? I'm reading a lot of heavy books this month, so I should probably read that just for some light-hearted fun, but also talking about real issues as well. I do think the book is light-hearted. I might be wrong. The second book is Take a Hint by Danny Brown, which when I didn't think that this book was going to be available, I read Get a Life, Chloe Brown, and then Take a Hint, Danny Brown is like the sequel, which came out last year. I did not think this book was going to be available because every single time everyone's talking about it, so many people are borrowing it. I think my library was like, oh, you're super lucky that you got this, and you can actually only get it for 14 days. So I guess I'm going to read it quicker than the rest because this is a golden opportunity told to me by my library. Essentially, I think it just follows Chloe Brown's sister. If you haven't read Get a Life, Chloe Brown, it's just a romance story with Chloe Brown, and she has two other sisters, if I'm not mistaken, called Danny and Eve. And this book would just follow their romantic lives, I guess. But I think the dynamics between the people who are having the romantic relationships differ from the sisters. I didn't necessarily like Get a Life, Chloe Brown. Like, I don't think it's one of those books I recommend, but it's definitely one of those books that's easy to get through, which is something I honestly need more because a lot of the books I've been picking up, I read the first two pages, I'm like, I don't think I can do this anymore, which just kills my reading vibe. So yeah, this is all actually. Hopefully I would be able to shoot a video early February, late January about reading all these books. Hopefully, because all these books I have selected and they are quite literally interesting. Thank you for watching my video. Do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And